I know in my heart that the gift of Lent, this precious, holy gift of 40 days, is the sort of thing that when you and I take it seriously and are intentional, it changes lives. It really does change lives. It's long enough that you and I can pick something and roll up our sleeves and dive in, but it's short enough that it doesn't seem like it's going to last forever. It's a gift of time to say, okay, Lord, how do I grow closer to you and closer to the people you put in my life? And I know this, we're busy. Life happens. Things are moving and shaking and going, and stuff is constantly on our plates. And if you and I do not take the time to step back and say, okay, what am I going to do about this Lent? It will blow by. And we'll be halfway into it, and maybe we're going to not eat chocolate or something. It's like we've missed the gift. You got 3 days to take some time right now to say, how am I going to make this special? How am I going to make this particularly unique for me for Lent? Now, I've talked about this, but folks, I think first things, we got to have a measure. Something that tells us if we're in the right direction or going the wrong way. First and foremost, I've brought this up before, the single most powerful measure I have for our spiritual life is the fruits of the Spirit. St. Paul writes about these, Galatians 5:22-23. They are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. St. Paul will say this, when you take these things and you put them out there and you say, you know what, if I see evidence of these things in my life, chances are God is in my life. But if I don't see these things, or worse yet, I see their opposites, then a bell better start be ringing in the back of my head because something is wrong. Something is destructive. And something's going to eat at my soul. So today, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. First things first, as you and I get ready for Lent, we say, okay, Lord, do I see them? Do I have evidence? Can I point to specific parts of my life and say, I have peace, I have joy, I see love? Because wherever we see those, it's time to put fuel on that fire. It's time to add energy, add effort, be more intentional about building up the Spirit in our lives and letting that happen. And if I don't see it, or if I see something destructive, this is the measure. And it means something's got to change. Something has to be different. Now, people will say, okay, well, that's great, but where do I look for these fruits of the Spirit? I'm going to give you 3 areas. First, what is it I do? My activities. What's coming out of my mouth? What are the things that I do? What are my thoughts really like? Because if my thinking and my speaking and my doing are spiritually fruitful, amen. But if I find parts of the activities I do that are destructive or harmful or wasteful for that matter, then maybe I better think about what are my activities and do they need to be altered, adjusted, changed. The second area, who am I doing it with? Who are the people in my life? Because you and I have people that when we're around them, we're better. When there's certain people in our life, spiritually we're built up. Good things are happening. It's positive. It's holy. It's wholesome. But there are also some times when we're around certain people and it ain't good. They're either distracting us, they're drawing us away, they're pulling energy and life right out of us. And frankly, we're not as nice or not as good. They can lead us in a bad direction. Okay, so with people, where do we see the spiritual fruits? And how do we see them at work? So we got activities, we got people. The third area is location. You realize that sometimes in certain places, it's better for me. And there are certain places that if I go to those places, it's destructive for me. That there are certain locations, certain spatial configurations. If I go to a certain place, I will find the fruits of the Spirit. And if I go to certain places, I'm going to find something else. Activities, people, places. These are three areas right now, today, we can look at and say, okay, Lord, what's the measure of my life? And be very blunt about it. Very straightforward. Because once we have that information, then we go to the bread and butter of Lent. Generally speaking, most people, to make a great Lent, are either going to do something unique or give up something. So what I'd like to say is, okay, that's great. Maybe this Lent we do something that enhances the fruits of the Spirit. I notice when I do these things, it's better. I notice when I do it with these people, it's better. So I'm going to do this for Lent because I know it brings life. It draws me closer to God and others. I'm going to do something intentional that will be spiritually fruitful. The giving up is then pretty easy because there are maybe certain things in my life that are not helping. And in fact, they're hurting. They're not building up, they're tearing down. I got to give that up. I got to sacrifice that. Because maybe it's something I'm thinking, or speech that's coming out of my mouth, or something I'm doing, or a certain relationship in my life, or a location I'm at. Something maybe I have to give up because it's not godly, it's not good, it's not holy. What a great way then to begin to practically say, how am I going to get into Lent? Folks, in the general scheme of things, we got lots of resources. And when it comes to that doing, I'm a big fan of study, pray, and serve. As the weeks unfold, I want you to think about this. Is there something you want to do to feed and nourish your brain? You know, the fact is, maybe it's spiritual reading. I know, because I've been giving them out for a couple years now, that most of us have quite a few books on a shelf somewhere. Maybe we've read them. Maybe they're collecting dust. But maybe for this Lent, we want to do some spiritual reading. Something, maybe it's a book we got here. Maybe it's something we've had and we say, you know what? It's time. I want to dig into a book. I want to feed that part of my brain and that part of my soul. Maybe instead of spiritual reading, it's Scripture. And maybe we say, you know what, this is the Lent, I'm going to read a chapter a day. I'm going to go to the Gospel of Matthew. And if you do it for 40 days in Lent, you're going to get through Matthew and through Mark. I'm just going to read a chapter. But I'm going to put my nose in the Scriptures. Because this both takes care of the study and the prayer. You can actually be praying the Scriptures as you learn about them. But maybe some people say, you know, I need to hear it. I got CDs. We've been giving those out. There's so many ways that we can study our faith. But then if we move to prayer, I know if you're registered in our Cathedral family, you got a devotional. It's 2 minutes. It's a chance to read a little something, have a half a cup of coffee, think about something, and let it carry you through your day. That to take a little bit of time every day to pray, just to chew on a thought and let that thought guide us through the day, has the ability to transform us. But prayer isn't just what we do in our homes. I got to lay this on the line. The single most powerful spiritual exercise most of us will do at Lent happens in a confessional. It happens when you and I take advantage of this incredible sacrament of grace. Every year, kids in religious ed, kids in the school, over half of them go to confession. Not because they're forced, just it's available, they go. For some people, the thought of going to confession is terrifying. They'd rather have a root canal. Maybe you know who you are. If it's been longer than 3, 4, 5 years, who are we kidding? The fact is, folks, one of the most powerful sacraments to encounter the forgiveness and healing and mercy and grace of Jesus. It changes us, it transforms us, and it opens our heart to receive, in fact, the very gifts of grace that God gives upon us. And I got to be honest about this. I know that some people would absolutely cringe at going to me because I know them for confession. I get that, and the church understands that. In the bulletin this week, I have a list of all the other churches in town and several in Duluth and their times for confession. So if you seriously, the thought of going to me would be terrifying. I get that. Go somewhere else. Here they are. These are their times. Open our hearts to the gift of grace. I've also listed under the Cathedral the time for our communal penance, when we'll fill the church with a bunch of different priests. And you can pick one and go. But I know this is a sacrament that changes us and opens our hearts and strengthens our lives and empowers us. And if it's been too long, maybe this is the Lent to say, I'm going to do this because it's spiritually fruitful. It's powerful. And what am I waiting for? What is holding me back? What's keeping me from God's grace? And then finally, service. We've got information for rice bowls in the back, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul in the back. But folks, service can happen. It can happen in our home. It can happen in our neighborhood. It can happen in our church. It can happen in our community. Our lives make a difference. And I want to just say that as we go into this Lent, how might God be putting something on our hearts to do this Lent? It might be a person that has somehow come across our radar and God has put them in our path. It might be a need that we see that's speaking to our heart. It might be an opportunity that just suddenly appeared. And we go, okay, Lord, I'll do that. But if the gift of life is precious and sacred and holy, then our lives have that power to make a difference. And I just would like to suggest that maybe, just maybe, there will be an opportunity for us to serve this Lent. And in the serving of another, our hearts are changed. We become closer to God and one another. The fruits of the Spirit can give us a measure. The activities, people, and places are the arenas of life. Study, prayer, service. There's so many ways. So the final thing is this. Pick one. We don't have to do it all. That's not possible. But think in these next few days of some way that speaks to your heart. Something that you say, I want to do that. It is better for us to do one thing well than to have the good intention of a half a dozen that we do poorly or not at all. Pick one and make it a great Lent where God speaks to our hearts. God bless you all.